Cool.
We are live here on Plus One EXP's Roll for Content actual play channel. My name is Tony Vicinda. You can find me at Tony Vicinda across pretty much any social media platform. You can also find us at Plus One EXP, which is our little whatever. You guys know what I'm going to say. It's all good.
Yeah, it's,
We're a weird little brand that multi-classes in tabletop game design, beard and skincare alchemy, and the Bardic College of Content Creation. Prestige Class is a series where we sit down with a creator we love in or around the tabletop RPG industry and talk to them about their work and see kind of what lessons that we can learn from that and that you can learn from that. If you're watching live right now, wherever you're watching, feel free to ask questions as we go along, and we will bring that into the conversation. Today, I'm joined by Sam, also known as Skullboy, also known as Better Legends, depending on where on the internet you are accessing. Sam, do you use he, him pronouns?
yes.
Okay. Wherever you're accessing him. Sam, do you want me to call you Sam or Skullboy? How do you like people to call you?
You can just call me. It's no problem. I'm one of those people that nicknames stick to. So I mean, no, it's whatever. It's whatever. Sam is fine.
I'm one of those people who will just create nicknames for people who don't have them also too. Usually just shortened versions of their names. It comes from like working in, I used to do a lot of group development work. And so there'd be like 5 Jennifers in a room or 5 Johns.
You gotta figure out who Jennifer the bloodthirsty is,
right,
and Jennifer the healer is, and
exactly. And it's all that's easy. The easiest way to do it, especially in corporate culture, is just to assign the bloodthirsty to one, the healer to another, the tank to a third, and they love it.
Exactly.
They love
everybody
it.
classes. So fine.
We're going to talk today a little bit about your work, about art that inspires us. People are always better at introducing themselves than I am typically, because I don't viciously stalk people on the internet to find out every last detail. But tell people out there watching who you are, what you do, and where they can find you online.
All right. My name is Sam, but I also go by Skullboy. And my company is Better Legends, illustration and design. And I am a freelance fantasy and science fiction illustrator working primarily in tabletop role-playing games. And that's sort of that's the basic thing. And then usually people say, what do you mean tabletop role-playing games? And then I say, oh, like, you ever heard Dungeons and Dragons? And they're like, yeah, I my kid watches Critical Role. And I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah, it's sort of like that, except a lot less people look at it. And they're like, okay. And then they wander away, and
You're saying your work isn't more popular than Critical Role? Because I bumped Matt Mercer for you. I want you to know that. And so, actually,
listen. All I've learned is you actually don't want that level of fame.
No, you don't.
I don't think. I'm happy to slink around in the shadows.
I went to for any Critical Role fans out there, I went to high school with Laura Bailey. Like it would not be a stretch to call us friends. I remember when Laura had just gotten her first couple episodes of DBZ in the can, going to Chili's with her and a few folks afterwards and talking about her first foray into voice acting. And it is buck wild sometimes when my kids are like, people will be like, who's the most famous person you know? And I'll be like, this person, but also there's a good chance if you're not a nerd that you have never heard of who they are. But I guarantee you they are far more famous than most of the other people you would know.
They're a niche pull.
Yeah.
But
it is also the person who impresses my children the most because they are all into anime, and a couple of her voice acting credits are like chef's kiss to them. So they're always super excited. Nice. So, no, it's awesome. I'm super excited to sit down and talk with you. I've been watching your work for a long time. Just been a fan. A little while ago, had reached out to you about a couple projects. Found out you were doing daily streams of just doing art, which right now daily almost of doing art, which I love. I think watching people who can draw do art is like watching magic happen in front of you, because there wasn't something and now there is. And so I was, when you said you wanted to become internet famous, I offered to lend you my 12 most stalwart fans to come on during the day and watch us chit chat with each other. But tell me about how you got involved with tabletop role playing games. Like what was that process like for you? When did you start playing? How did you start falling down the rabbit hole?
Well, there are two stories. One is what got me started on the idea of this could be a really cool thing, which happened when I was very young. And my dad used to just, tell me sort of interactive bedtime stories. And so he would just like start a story and then be like, which door do they go through? And I'd be like, oh, they go through this one. And then he'd be like, oh, and there's like a giant scorpion and it's got two tails. What do the tails do? And I'd be like, oh, they like one puts you to sleep and the other one kills you, and like that kind of stuff. So that was really cool. And that was like totally, I think, what got me like in the role playing game headspace. But it wasn't until like college that I actually played D&D
That's
or
awesome.
any other tabletop game.
Was your dad did he just like the, like, I think for a parent, there's like either the, I don't want to come up with a story, but I can totally ask questions, or sometimes it's like, I think it's more fun when we do this together. Or did he play role-playing games? Was like he into storytelling and other stuff like that?
No, he lived role playing games. My dad he's a Vietnam veteran and then traveled the world after that, and is like one of those guys that you meet and he's got like a story for everything,
That's awesome.
kind of thing. So yeah, he just like he always had a lot of stories growing up, and uh, between that, I think it's a conjunction of him telling me like his stories, and then my mom read me all of the Little House on the Prairie books, which are hella D&D. I will fight anyone who thinks otherwise. And then from there, a lot of it was just sort of, yeah, like book reading and stuff along those lines. And then, but yeah, he was never like, I mean, we used to watch like the Sinbad movies, like the old Sinbad movies, the Harryhausen ones.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of my like my fantasy, my pillars of fantasy are like Harryhausen claymation fantasy, and then like Redwall, and yeah, like Little House on the Prairie. It's like this weird hodgepodge sort of collage of like that kind of stuff. And then like later on, I got into like Lord of the Rings and that kind of stuff.
I feel like Redwall is such a like interesting entry point for a lot of people into the world of fantasy. Like, it was the books that even conservative parents were willing to buy their children and let them read, and so it became this interesting, like not anywhere near as heavy-handed as Narnia is, like not anywhere near as allegorical, even as, if Tolkien hates it, as Lord of the Rings can end up being, like just really interesting foray into the world of fantasy for a lot of folks in their 20s and 30s nowadays. Like, it's perfect timing.
Yeah, and well, and I mean, I name an author that's better at writing food than Brian Jakes.
Oh my goodness. No, like I learned so many like words that I probably kind of knew, but I was like, oh, you could use that to describe food, or oh, that actually means something related to food. And so,
how else does a young American lad learn about what a scone is?
Right. You know, this is pre the you know, the new scones probably also, in addition to a lot of TTRPGs, scones in America probably own their market share to him.
Yeah.
So no, yeah, and yeah, just such great like multi-level like ongoing universe world building storytelling in a totally accessible way. No, that's awesome. So so you said that, you know, through your dad was one way. You know, you had some of these other influences also too. And then what about art? Like, did you start drawing at a young age? Was that something that was always a part of who you were?
Yeah, I've always, I always think about it as, you know, you're early on in life, like you do lots of things and then you get praised for some things more than other things. And the things you get praised for are the things that you're like, maybe I'm kind of good at this. And then you just keep doing that. And that was art for me. So I've been drawing, and I recently, this last year or so during quarantine, a fun quarantine project I did was I took all of my old sketchbooks and I like labeled and dated all of them as best as I could. And I have one from when I was about 4 years old, still. And
awesome.
So like, that's like the earliest record of art making that I can find of myself. So there's lots of Ninja Turtles in that, and Transformers, and, you know, all the good toy selling properties from the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah. Now you currently make your living as a freelance artist, and I think for a lot of people, like, the concept of being freelance is something that everybody's like, I like the idea of that, but it's also deeply terrifying, which I don't know if that ever goes away. Like, I
no, it doesn't.
Yeah, I run my own business, and it doesn't feel that much different than freelancing. I just happen to have like a quantified unit of things that I sell, but otherwise I feel like I've got to go through a lot of the same conversations. But it is different because it's not as much client work. It's more just the marketing, advertising side. And so I would love to maybe dive into kind of what made you kind of make that leap into freelance. I don't know that much about like your journey professionally, but were you like, hey, I'm just going to just make a go of this? Were you doing something else and wanted to get out of it? What took you from whatever you were doing before into the world of freelance?
Well, it was a little bit of everything. I was I went to art school uh because I said I figured it was the thing that I was best at, and I was always real bad at math and all those, all the sort of tropes of the modern artist. And I did 4 years of art school, and that was real fun, and studied printmaking and studied drawing and a little bit of ceramics and sound art and like all these various things. And then after college, I sort of stopped. I didn't go down, like I didn't move to a big city, so I didn't like get into any sort of like big city art scenes or anything like that. So I just sort of kept drawing, but I worked in coffee. It was sort of a breath of fresh air after like 4 years of the fine art sort of education
Mm-hmm.
program, to just like I was just working with my hands and making people like nice espresso drinks and stuff like that. And for a while that was like very much like my jam, and I was like, this is cool, I could totally do this. And then I got burned out on that and started working as a screen printer for a while, and did that. And then the shop that I was working at had to close down, and I was sort of dabbling in freelance around that time still. And the whole time, I mean, I was on my first internet place for role playing games was Google Plus.
Yeah.
So I was like hanging out in that community and just like reading the blogs and playing games. And it was sometime, I guess it was like I'm going on like 3 years now of like full-time freelance, that I was sort of in and out of various coffee shops and whatever, just sort of working jobs that I could find. And it was around that time that I started doing a few pieces for In Search of Games.
Mm-hmm.
And I did Ruinous Palace of the Metagorgos, and then I started working with In Search of Games, Chris Manell, who is he's the main guy there. He was looking at some of the pieces I made and was just like, hey, would you be willing to, like, I'm interested in like doing this, like I got these ideas for like some sort of like dragon kind of stuff. And I was like, that's kind of cool, let's do stuff. And he was just like, well, I'll pay you to do one every month. And I'm like, in my head I was just like, oh shit. Like, oh, I'm sorry, can we swear
Yeah, you're
on
good.
here?
You're
I
good.
don't want to. Okay, all right, sorry. I just like to check. I was just like, oh shit, I think I could do this. I think I could, like, I think I know enough people in this scene that like me, that I think I could do this. And so I started going off of that. And I was like, I talked to my wife and I was just like, is this something I should do, do you think? And she's just like, I mean, if you think you can go for it, you should go for it. And I was like, okay. And then I did, and it's just been getting bigger since. I think I'm very lucky to have support from, like I said, my partner. And our cat loves what I do, and my parents are very supportive. And like, because I think a lot of times we don't live in a society that's built inherently to sustain artists doing things.
Right.
So I think you need help a lot of times, and you need to be lucky, and you need to be persistent. And I think I'm a pretty decent triangulation of that.
Yeah, I think that's I think one of the things that I feel like would be the most helpful, because like I said, there's a lot of people. Like, some people it might be editing, some people it might be actual design, like design work for the games itself. Some people it might be graphic design, which is different than illustration, or illustrate. It might be a different medium of art. There's a lot of people I think out there who are trying to figure out how to navigate. Look, I want to, even if I don't want to be freelance full time, I want to learn how to navigate the idea of doing freelance work better. And it's actually one of the things I think that overall, especially in the small indie TTRPG side of things, everybody is kind of universally really bad at. And if you're good at it, you might work for a company that then has a little bit of structure because you've realized that's actually really helpful. But what do you think are some of the biggest lessons you've kind of learned along the way in freelance?
In terms of freelancing, everything for me at least is like sort of states of mind. That's how I try to think about things, to get myself in the right state of mind to do whatever job it is. So I try to approach each project um from the perspective of like, what like drawing style would fit this best. And that helps me a little bit detach myself from like is my style going to work with this? And it's just like, my style is, I think I try to reflect off of whatever I see people trying to put out. So like, it's a give and take kind of thing, but I try to, I've started viewing freelance RPG work just like playing an RPG or being an adventurer. And it's just like, you find some wealthy patron who's like, I've got an expedition planned, and then I've got 5 heroes, and maybe you can go and get the treasure. And it's just like, that's how I frame it for myself to keep myself sane a little
That's
bit, because
awesome.
I oftentimes think about like, when you're in that process of like, you finish up your work that you've got going, and you go and you look at like whatever small pile of money you have left from the time that it took you to finish the thing, if you got paid up front, and then it's just like, okay, time to go back to the dungeon. And then
Right.
you get on Twitter and say like, I'm looking for work, I'm looking for projects, well, you got a cool idea, let's do it. And that whole sort of thing. And every time I talk to, because I try to keep up with all the other freelancers in my little circles and everything like that, and every time I run that sort of metaphor by them, they're like, yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
So
What genre of game is your freelance work? I mean, is it OSR? Is it like what edition is it? Like that's
I try to so this is the other it just gets so much nerdier, I think,
Let's do it.
the more I talk about this. But and I talked about this when I talked to Questing Beast like a couple of months, a year ago or something, is like, oh, hold on, the cat is being bad. Excuse me, do you mind? Could you could you could you not? She doesn't care. I'm sorry. Look at that. Look at that.
Look at
She's
that.
trying to hack
Yeah,
into my
I
wife's
have-
computer. You can't see because my web camera is very bad, but she's back there somewhere. But what I was saying is that I think about like drawing styles and like illustration sort of like kung fu now, where it's like you go and you train at like the different kung fu schools, and you like learn how to sort of fight differently depending on like the situation
Right.
that you're in. And it helps me a lot to sort of detach, like, oh, it makes it feel like, oh yeah, I go into this stance, and then it's like, okay, this is like how I work when if I'm doing like, yeah, like something that's kind of OSR adjacent. Well, this is how I work if I'm doing something that like the people might use the term sword dream for it, which is a term I disdain only because it's hard to say. I'm very critical about names, just because it drives me crazy when I can't like say a word properly. I'm sorry, I'm just
Go
gonna
ahead. Yeah,
move
absolutely.
her out of the
You're
room.
good.
So sorry.
You're good.
Hi. Yes, no, I love you. I love you, but you have to.
If you guys are out there watching right now, if you have questions for Sam, go ahead and toss them in the chat. Pretty much wherever you are should be fine. I should be able to see him, I think. If not, you can hop on over to Twitch and type them in there. We're happy to ask your questions. We're sitting here talking with Sam, aka Skullboy of Better Legends, about what it right now about what it is to do freelance work and some of the lessons that he's learned along the way. But if you all have any questions, go ahead and toss them in. So yeah, you were saying like it's about like the names are very important for you.
Names are very important for me, and I just get hung up on them when it's like a name that I would like. I think people type out a word and they never say it out loud, and that's how you end up with things that have like the same letter at the beginning and the end of the two separate words, and then that drives me crazy. But I just like, I mean, I can sort of tell usually like what kind of work people want out of me when they contact me initially, and that's good. And then sometimes I'll ask and just like, hey, what are the pieces on my website that like draw your attention most, or like make you feel like this? Because it's like I have a lot of sort of different styles that I work in, I think, at least. And it's
You do. Just people aren't familiar with your art necessarily. I'm gonna pop up us over to a different screen so people can kind of see some of the work from your website specifically. We're gonna look at your Patreon in a little bit, but I just want people to see kind of the breadth of style here. And it's really interesting. Like there are some pieces I'll look at and I'll absolutely recognize as something that you have made. There are other pieces that I'll look at and then I'll find out you made them and I'm just like, oh man. That's all. It's never like I'm surprised, but it's also just it'll be a flex on a style that I haven't necessarily seen you do, or that I've seen a couple other people do and just don't know which one of the 3 or 4 people who I know can do it in that style, or if it's somebody new, and so but there's just absolutely gorgeous variations of some of this. Your color palettes are always just so sharp, though. Like that's one of the
Thank you
things I
so
think
much. I
is
really appreciate that.
100% consistent about all of your work that I just absolutely adore is your color choices. And so, um,
Oh, sorry, I have to address a question in your chat. My cat's name is Marceline the Vampire Queen, named after the Adventure Time character.
there we go. We were absolutely going to get there. I just want to make sure. Yeah, if you all have any questions, just type them in. But yeah, this is one of the reasons I was like, it's not just that I am a fan of the work Sam does. It's not just that Sam has an excellent pedigree. Like the work itself is objectively like just absolutely amazing. And like I said, for me, like for our last game, we had somebody, my in-house graphic designer, who is not an illustrator by any means, not I guess not the last game we funded, but Beards and Beyond, my first game. We did most of the art for that in-house, except for we did one piece with Nick Nazzaro, who I absolutely adore their work also too. And now I've lost my interview man. There we go. But we were talking about this right before we went live. The conversation when you approach somebody about work is just kind of this really interesting give and take kind of dance, where there are even times where somebody comes to me for work, I'll just say yes, and then later on I'll be like, what you mentioned pay, we didn't actually define what that is. Or like I'll tell somebody, here's kind of my budget at the very beginning, and then we'll start working, and then they'll say, oh, I really wanted to do this, but it's going to be more than your budget, and then we'll have a conversation. Like it's oftentimes just an evolving conversation. For somebody who is an artist who's oftentimes getting approached by these things, like what's kind of your preferred way to address some of those conversations? Like what's most helpful for you?
I like being very upfront about everything. I like paper trails. I like honest conversations, and I like numbers when it comes to art talk these days. Just because I've been doing this now. I mean, I started doing it full time about 3 years ago, but I've been doing like art for money for games for close to 9 years now. So I've gotten very good at fielding the emails, which is a skill I did not have going into all of this, but now I can sort of, I know how to handle a conversation so as to both not scare someone away with sticker shock, but also be honest with them about what I need in terms of, my finances and everything like that. And I think that's you just gotta work within the system. Like sometimes I'll, if we get to that point, I just say like, what was your projected budget for this? Like, what are you thinking that you want to spend? Because I don't want to bankrupt anybody.
Right.
I don't think art is like something that you should be like, if you don't have enough money to pay people for art, you shouldn't try and pay people for art.
Right.
Like, I think you should probably learn how to draw in that case.
Yeah.
I'm
somebody who will constantly speak out against what I think there's a number of unethical pieces, I think, for services like Fiverr. Now there's some other ones like Upwork that I don't have the same problems with, but part of the problem with global competition and conspicuous consumption is that they drive prices for people who are making their living doing art down, people who can like massively replicate very similar types of work that are not actually unique for a project, or that maybe they stole somewhere else and are passing off as their own. There's all kinds of things that come in with that. But I'm somebody who's always, we were talking about this right before, and like, I'm like, I want to pay people what they want to be paid. And I'm okay saying like, I would rather not be able to work with you right now than have you pay less. And if somebody's like, no, I really want to work on this project, just tell me what you have, I'll absolutely be like, here's what I have, like it's not a problem for me. But I think people have to just get comfortable with both sides of that. And that means a little bit of a consideration about what is your budget whenever you're approaching someone. Like you should know that number. Or if you don't, just being honest, like, I don't even know what's fair. Tell me. Like I paid somebody to make a tabletop simulator mod for one of my games last week. And I was like, we didn't nail the numbers down at the very beginning. Like I had a price range in mind. I said, oh yeah, I've got a range. And they said, great, here's kind of what I need to get started. I shot them that stuff. We never finished the conversation around this specific number. And when they came back, we both asked the question at the same time. Like they had almost finished and they were like, hey, how much did you have for this? And I said, hey, how much did you want to get paid again? And I was like, here was my range. Here's the one more change I want you to make. It sounds like it might be more complicated. And they were like, yeah, that range for everything I've done so far would be fine. It'd be like 50 more bucks to do the other piece. And I was like, do it. Like, that's fine. That's great. You know, I'm happy to go out of my range for this piece that I thought was complicated and going to cost me way more than 50 bucks. So absolutely.
Yeah.
And now I've got a phenomenal tabletop simulator mod for that board game, like that somebody did in a week, and they got paid what they wanted, and I paid them something I was totally comfortable with, even if it was more than my range, because they were able to do something I didn't necessarily expect. And so, yeah, I think going back and forth about that's good. Danafik wants to know how you can tell you're familiar enough with the scene to know that you can rely on mutuals to contribute to work. Maybe Danafik, maybe tell us a little bit more about that question.
Yeah, that seems like there's like more to that question that maybe I'm not picking I mean, so for me at least, let me see if I can sort of work my way around the question. I had been playing in games with people and reading lots of blog posts and like playing games, you know, with people I'd met online for like a while, and then I was just making stuff. Like when I don't have a client job, I'm just still making stuff and I'm just putting it out there. And the more you do that, the more you get back. And it's just like you just gotta I think maintaining a practice for whatever it is that you do, it doesn't have to be necessarily daily, but like I mean, I draw every day. And I've been drawing every day with a few exceptions for most of my life. And it's just because that's the way that I need to live. So like there are some things where it's like I've pushed myself in some directions with that where it's like when I want it to be very regimented, it's just like I draw this much every day, or like, I try and do that. But I think you just sort of you got to feel it out a little bit. It's all very turn off your targeting computer. Luke, is everything okay? Kind of. I think, but I mean the thing I would say to someone who is interested in getting into making games or anything like that is play games, and then when you get to that point in a game where someone's just like, "Can I do this?" or "Do you have a chart for that?" make it, and then go from there. Like it's I think a lot of game stuff that isn't very good was made in a vacuum. Whereas the game stuff that is really good was made at a table in a moment.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And that's where games and art get a little bit different, I think.
Yeah, and it sounds like contribute might have meant like, how do you know people will pay you? Because Danafik offered up, like you mentioned, you were familiar enough with the area to know that you could do freelance work in that area.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, I mean, a little bit of it is people sending you sending you a message and saying like, "Hey, like, could you make something like this? And how much would you charge for that?" So a little bit is people reaching out to you, and then sometimes it's reaching out to other people.
Yeah. No, and like I'll say this: if you're an artist who is like trying to get started, I'm never going to tell people to work for free. But like I've had the last 2 projects I've done were people who were artists who approached me and said, "Hey, I would like to design a game with you. I'll do all the art and help with the design, but can you do the primary on the system?" To which I, as somebody who's always trying to get art for my games made, was like, 100%. Like, I will absolutely do the system design work, which is a real skill also too. If you're gonna contribute the art, and then we're just splitting the proceeds from the game. Like it's that, that's an easy thing for me to agree to. I'm never gonna approach an artist and ask that, but if you are somebody who is an artist and you want to start like dipping your toe, and if you know people who are designers, like just offering to do some work with them, if they're small, to figure that out. And that's about figuring out who are the people you want to be doing that work with, because there are people out there you probably don't want to be doing that.
It's true, and you'll figure that out along the way too. Yeah. Everybody's going to work with people that like later on they're like, I probably wouldn't do that again. Yeah. And it's just like, that's okay. You live and you learn, and then you move on and you work with better people. And it's like, and I think in terms of that, like when it's a question of like nobody's got any money for anything, that's when you like say like, okay, let's work on this game together, and you all do all the writing for it and I'll do all the art for it, and then we'll split the profits.
Yeah.
And like, those are interesting things to get into also. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, there are some people that like I think every artist has like a small handful of people that they will do whatever for free.
Yeah.
and for whatever reason. And it's like, I think everybody, you have to draw your own lines for it, because there's some people where it's just like anything that they make, I know is going to be cool. And that's so much more. It's important for me to do things that I just think are cool if I'm going to keep doing this, because otherwise, like, kind of what's the point?
Yeah.
Um, and so it's a combination of jobs like that, and then there's jobs where it's just like I don't think it's as cool, but there's good money there, and it's like I can make that compromise. That's fine. Like I will spend my time because it's like, I mean, the cat needs dinner.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure there are also some where you're like, look, there's also no amount of money in the world that's going to make me want to do
Oh
that.
yeah. Oh yeah. No, there's projects that I've just flat out turned down because it's just like I don't. It's either it's like it's like I do a sort of a process when I'm working with a new client where I do a little bit of, like, some light digging on them. I just, I go to their Twitter, I go to their Instagram, something like that, and I just sort of see what their deal is. Do they seem like the kind of person that, like, I want my name next to somewhere? And I think that's like everybody draws those lines for themselves again, but, like, I think it's important to sort of know where you stand.
This entire interview is actually Sam just still feeling me out on a project proposal I dropped like 6 months ago. So
Listen,
it's
like I said, illustrators, we're all just sell swords. We're all just, we've got our small bag of coins, and we're sort of, is this worth the risk?
No, I like I said, I've been incredibly interested. You have a very like you have an excellent Patreon, so I'm gonna pop it up. And this is actually
Thank
like
you.
I am a patron. I didn't know you had one until I was watching one of your streams a couple weeks ago. It didn't surprise me at all. I just hadn't realized
Right,
it.
because
And so
we've all got Patreons.
right, and
But
so and it's like I said, I actually think like it is. I'm kind of surprised that you don't have far more patrons. You're putting out like absolutely tremendous stuff on a fairly regular basis. That's just like, it's just gorgeous. But tell me a little bit about like how do you approach Patreon as a platform and like your patrons, like what do you feel is the value add for you? And then how do you approach them and kind of getting people to come check out the work that you're doing?
that's fair. So I when I started Patreon, I started my Patreon because they were changing the rules for Patreon, and they're just like, if you started a Patreon before this date, it means that you get this profit share, and if you started after this date, it means you get less of a profit share. So I was like, well, it's time to start a Patreon, because it seems like it's blowing up. If they're making that distinction, it's because a lot of people are showing up and they don't want to pay them as much anymore. So I'm going to get in on that. And when I first started my Patreon, I started it as the Super Poster Club, which was I had a theme song for it and everything. And the Super Poster Club was every month I was just doing an illustration, and part of it was from the perspective of I was like, I don't have a lot of just like big full color illustrations that I could just like have like in my portfolio. So I was just like, well, I'll start this thing. And so every month I did an illustration, and sometimes I like polled people on like what they thought I should make, or gave a couple of different ideas and said, oh, it should be this or this. And at the end of the month, I just like gave you the download, like the high res, like, oh, here's the file, and as like a PDF, and you get it printed yourself. Like, I don't want to do that right now. If it starts making money, maybe we'll do that. And I did that for, I don't know if I did it for a whole year. There's like, I think there's like 7 or 8 posters that I made for that. That's just like a different thing every month. And then I sort of, that got a couple of people, but it wasn't as many people as I wanted it to be. So I was like, maybe I should shift this a little bit into like more game stuff, because that's like, I started thinking about words like endemic audiences and, sort of that kind of stuff. And I shifted it to be more game related stuff. So like sort of the second phase of it was, okay, now it's Better Legends, Friends and Foes, and I was doing uh like NPC drawings, and I had a big table, and every Friday I'd get on my stream and we'd roll a random character like NPC, and then we'd do like sort of inside out world building where we'd start with the character, and then we'd sort of expand the world around him. We draw the character, and there's a bunch of those on there, which are really fun. I really liked doing them. I'll turn them into a book someday, which is what they're going to write on my gravestone. But after that, I couldn't really keep up with that. Like it just like wasn't clicking with me in the way that I wanted it to. So I did what I always do in this scenario, and it was like I just completely destroyed all the structure of everything, changed the pricing for it. So it was like, okay, this is now a Patreon where you can give me any amount of money you want, and everyone can always see everything that's on it. And anyone that is subscribed to me I'll give you files for things that I make. And that's what we're going to do. And that sort of freed me up from like the weird mental space that I was in with the Patreon, where I could like just sort of do what I wanted with it. So now we do a bunch of stuff with the Patreon, and some of it is stuff that people care about, and some of it is probably people don't care about. But you can subscribe, you can not subscribe. What I basically gave people the opportunity to do is give me money if they want to, and not put it behind a wall if they don't want to pay for it. And that it makes me feel very comfortable about having a couple of weeks maybe in a row where I don't post anything,
Mm-hmm.
but then the next week I might post 5 things,
Right.
which like happened like last month, where I was doing all of these, things where it's just like, oh yeah, here you have this and have this and have this. And then anything that I make in terms of right now, the only thing that you can get this way is last year's Zine Quest, the 10 people you meet in the Undergarden. But like all of my patrons can just download that, because I just want people to have the things. If they're supporting me in some way, I think it's totally fine that they can go and get stuff like that. So
yeah, no, I love it. Like I said, you just mentioned it offhand, and I loved that vision of like, yeah, whatever level you back at, like we're good. And I popped over and I hopped on and became very, and I actually like our next game is the game we're working on right now is a dungeon diving. Well, it's a fantasy kitchen, so you're working in some sort of gourmet kitchen.
okay, but I like it already.
Right. And so all of the essentially classes are position cooks, right? So what position you have in the gourmet kitchen matters. No one's the sous chef. You got to multi-class and get up to a certain level to do that yet. Master chef or the head chef is kind of the GM. And they come out and they basically post, here's the menu for the week. And then when you go into your refrigerator, because instead of having food delivered, you dive down into the dungeon and you have to kill things and slaughter things and bring them back up in order to prepare the menu that the head chef has given you for the week. And then there's a mini game at the end that you will be like that'll help you level up your kitchen. So you start out with a very basic kitchen, no communal rating, but you'll be able to attract adventurers and other things to your kitchen, hire other NPC employees that will give you benefit in that mini game and other things also too. And essentially it's just this weird time work fantasy kitchen. I think we're just going to go PBTA because it's easy, but the mini game will probably be based on our covered in shit system that we did for Repugnant. But you had a chef on there that you had done recently that's like a chef character, and like I had Eric, the guy who's doing the art, had just popped me over a couple sample images earlier that day. Totally different, totally whatever. I was like, but hey, also I found this and it's amazing. You should go check out Sam's work. There's just some really fun stuff on there.
That's really cool. First of all, that game sounds awesome. I am obsessed with the idea of adventure chefs. They've always been sort of a fixture in this sort of loose world that I'm making.
Oh yeah.
Ever since you ever read it's a webcomic called Rutabaga?
I haven't.
Rutabaga Adventure Chef. Check it out. It's very cool, but it's basically that was sort of that, and I also have like a weird obsession with this old anime called Fighting Foodons, which is Pokemon but with like chefs.
Yeah.
So it's or like Yu-Gi-Oh, where it's like they put like magic cards down on dishes and then
familiar, yeah.
Yeah, and then it turns into Fried Ricer, which is just like a karate guy, but with like a bowl of fried rice for a head. It's so good / bad, and I'm fully obsessed with it.
My touchstone for it was there's a manga called Delicious in Dungeon, and there's 7 or 8 of them, and they're just diving down, and their only way to survive going down deep enough with no money is to eat the things you kill. And I was like, it had been an idea I'd had to have a couple times. And then Eric's the artist. He approached me and was like, hey, you want to work on something together? And I said, what are some of your ideas? He was like, I really would love to do something where like maybe you're a sorcerer, but you work as a saucier in a kitchen. And I was like, cool. I'm gonna write down 5 ideas, and this you like. I'll toss them into Google Docs, shoot them back over to you. Tell me what you think, and we've just been kind of going back and forth from there. But this is kind of where we've landed, and like even like he didn't know about like the covered in shit stuff we did or the mini gamer, but he'd already been like, it'd really fun if you like toss things in a skillet. And I was like, so we'll actually have it where you can just toss the stuff if you want, but you can print out a piece of paper, put it in the bottom of a skillet at your house, and like for the rolls also too if you want. So
oh, that's really good.
Yeah,
that's really good. Yeah, I've played in a couple of games where there was a person I was consistently playing with where she always played the same character but like reincarnated in like whatever world, like as a different sort of version of herself. But she was like a bard that was a chef, and she ran a blog called The Bardic Chef. And so she would do all of these things where she like had recipes that it was like a cooking blog where she like did recipes and everything like that, but they were like also combined with like play reports from the various games that she was playing this character
awesome.
in. So it was a very cool, yeah. And there's a couple of people that are doing that. The hungry dungeon master, one of my regular people that I just met in my stream, Particle Queen. She does a blog that, because she's a chef, and so like all of her D&D that she writes about is chef informed. So like I love that. It's like I like playing D&D with people that it's not their only thing that they do, because that's how you get, I think, all the really like the weird good stuff like comes from, people that are like, oh, like you want a fun time, play a role-playing game with a registered nurse, and and find out all of the triage that they know through that.
Right.
Like that kind of stuff is like, I love that.
Yeah. When someone can leverage a real world skill into like, we played last night Coyote and Crow, which is this awesome Native American game, which they actually did. One of their first 48-hour things was 5 recipes by an award-winning Native American chef that if you've backed in the first 48 hours, you got it. They're just digital. There's nothing specific about them other than like their traditional, they're semi-traditional meals by a Native American chef. But I actually found out it's because that chef was writing they wanted a menu for a book in the world, which is this kind of non-colonialized alternate future. And so they had this Native American chef create a menu for the restaurant in their world. And I was like, man, I love the world building that went in that. And then they turned some of those recipes into full, you can make these at home recipes for this kind of first 48 hour backer goal. It was a totally cool flex on that, but it was just people taking, here's stuff we love and we want in our game, and here's somebody who can do it, go nuts,
Well, right. And when you think about it, it's like we were talking about Redwall earlier. I, as a kid, had the Redwall cookbook, which is like, that's the trickle down version of like, okay, you have a guy that writes really good food scenes, and then years later they release a cookbook that's based on that. So you can just flip that and say like, why don't we start with a cookbook set in, like an imagined reality, and then that's your jumping off point. Like I really like the idea of just like flopping that kind of stuff around and just like playing with different Genesis points for world building. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of fun stuff that you can do like that, and it's really amazing to see kind of like when you sit down and you talk to designers about what influenced them. And it's one thing when if they're making a retro clone or something that's just a pastiche of another game, like that's totally great. That game is what inspired them. It's absolutely viable. But then you'll find out there are these little things that designers do because they love this other thing, and so they want to put it into their world. Like even me, like I make balms for a living. But like I'm an item checker. Like I'm the kind of person who always wants to know how alchemy and other stuff works in a world and how I can mix things together and make other things. And it is like that obsession then became like me being like just starting to do some of that stuff on my own, and then evolved into, okay, now a lot of those things are totally fused together in very weird ways in my life.
Well,
and
right.
So yeah, I mean, like it's just crazy to see how some of those things overlap.
Yeah, you find your niche. I mean, when I first started doing a lot of the work that I first started doing in RPGs was, I mean, I was just, when I was playing games with people, I would just draw everybody's character. And then I started doing these sort of like ornamental character sheets for people. And that was some of the first like RPG work I was doing, was just for free. It was back when I had a Tumblr.
Right.
Good luck finding it.
No, actually, not good luck. The preview, one of the graphics, I don't know if it's this one or it's this one here. I'm going to switch this over so y'all can see it. our graphic designer, when I popped him everything, he'll sometimes go through and find links. So if you go to betterlegends.tumblr.com, unless it is listed underneath, and I was like, huh, that's weird. I probably should have just had him list your Patreon. But now that you've said it's hard to, I'm just glad we can just point people directly to it. And so, there you go. But sorry, I interrupted.
Oh no, that's all right. It was just me like doing like saying like, hey, anybody who's got a character that they wish had like a cool character sheet of it, I just like need ideas, like because I'm sort of formulating this project where I just want to draw character sheets that are like cool looking, and so because I had posted like a very old image of just like it was a second edition character I'd made that was a frog something for a campaign. It was just like a fun thing that I did, but then I posted on Tumblr and like somebody was like, "Oh my god, that's so cool! Can you do mine?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so like I just started like drawing people's characters like with sort of ornamental like here's your stats and everything, and it was this cool sort of. It felt like I was like memorializing these characters, and so I still do that. Like if anybody like especially when I'm like in between jobs, I'll just put out a call and say, "Hey, commissions are open, doing character sheets like and I've done stuff for like that like dungeon masters have commissioned for their parties. I've done stuff where parties have gotten together, pooled their money and commissioned like big group portraits for their dungeon master as like a gift. That's the kind of stuff I think I like the most. Is it's so pure to the hobby, and it's so everybody that's partaking in it is just having a blast, and they're so excited, and there's not as much back and forth as like, well, does this look right for this sort of thing, and it's just like they just I don't know, it's very like they like the work, I like that they like the work, here's all your characters in sort of whatever the default style I'm working in is, and everybody's just happy about it. It's I don't know, it's very nice.
Love it. Any parting thoughts you have before, I don't know if anybody has any questions, go ahead and drop them in. But if you have any parting thoughts, otherwise just tell people, again, what are some of the best places to find you online?
The best places to find me, I'm most active on Twitter and Instagram at better_legends. I'm trying to stream every day on Twitch as myself, skull_B01. That's Skullboy on Twitch. And then I also do like video game stuff on Twitch with my wife and my friend, and that's at Indoor Playground. And so we have a bunch of different shows for that. And then betterlegends.com is the website. Better_legends on Patreon. You can sort of take your pick. I'm somewhere. I try to spread myself out. I'm around.
Awesome. I'm very excited. We'll have to get you back on sometime to actually play a game of something at some point in the future.
That would be cool. I've never done like an actual play thing. I've listened to a few, but it's not ever been sort of the avenue that I've taken with any of this. So I would be happy to do that.
It's what I always tell people whenever they're getting on for an actual play. Like people can pay as much attention or as little attention to the chat as they want. Like it's almost the most fun when you got like when it's just my job to take care of that. But it's also fun to have the ability sometimes to just like pitch out NPC names or stories to the chat and be like, as the GM, it's the most fun to be able to be like, all right, I'm gonna I'm just gonna toss a little bit of this work off my plate in the same way I would do to players. Say like, yeah, what do you think their name is? Like you can say the same thing to the chat and get some of the most buck wild stuff back to you. That's absolutely a blast. And so I will say I think it's way more fun as a GM, but I also hate running streams and GMing at the same time, so I don't ever almost do that. But
yeah, that a little bit seems like a nightmare.
Yeah, it's
to me.
too much. And so if you guys want to find Sam's work, again, the links right below his face, the ones he just said, searching Better Legends or Skullboy online will get you there a lot of the time. You can find us at +1EXP across all social media platforms. You can go to +1EXP.com to find our games, our bombs. We've got a new game going up, I think tomorrow in the store, but it'll certainly be up by Monday. It's not one of our games, but it's one that it's the first game that's come to print from our +1 Forward initiative, which is where we donate money to a small or first-time creator to help them pay for art, pay for a playtesting packet. In this situation, we paid for the UK print run for Hieronymus, which is a Hieronymus Bosch-inspired RPG. You're running across Hieronymus Bosch paintings. It's kind of a hex crawl PBTA hack, and you're being pursued by an existential dread called the Follower. Our friend Laurie Connell from the UK designed it, but then we also went went ahead and bought 83 copies for our store also too to help fund a run in the US. So if you buy that, it helps support specifically the next Plus One Forward project we'll be doing also too, which will be investing in other first time or small creators. But anything you do and you want to find more about that, you can go to plus1exp.com. But until next time, this has been Prestige Class with Sam, aka Skullboy from Better Legends, and class is dismissed. That's the thing we say at the end now. This is the only show I have a sign off for.
I like that. That's good.
Vi came up